America. Since 1971, HAC has provided below-market financing for affordable housing and community development, technical assistance and training, research and information, and policy formulation to enable solutions for rural communities. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the benefits of using building components. Today, we will be discussing how nonprofit housing practitioners can accelerate their construction timelines with less highly skilled labor by using pre-manufactured building components. Thank you to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Rural Capacity Building Program for sponsoring today's event. Jess Loesch is the Executive Director of the SBCA. Formerly, he was a component manufacturer who served as president and a member of the board of directors. Jess has considerable experience in structural building components and the broader construction industry. Jess has received an MBA from the University of Montana and also a business administration degree from the University of Montana. And now the final speaker that I'd like to introduce today, Mac Williams. In 1972, Mac's father started a family construction business, building and repairing homes. At the age of 16, his father made him a partner in the family business, where Mac quickly learned to design the homes that they built. As the business grew, Mac and his dad began designing and building their own subdivisions to build their homes on. Throughout his career, Mac has assisted his church in disaster relief projects and helped communities rebuild. He's also led construction teams in Africa build churches. Throughout his career, Mac has worked as a framer and led many construction framing crews. With experience building over 2,500 homes under his tool belt, Mac is content helping Habitat of Caroline County build workforce homes for their community. Now I'd like to hand over the microphone to today's speakers.
Hello, like the introduction said, my name is Jess Loesch with the Structural Building Components Association. And let's just make sure that I've got the slides here going through here. So we should be seeing a slide of what is SBCA. Well, Structural Building Components Association, we're a trade association representing the manufacturers of components.
Jess, remember to hit the take control button at it should be toward the top of your screen, or if you want me to page through, I can do that.
I got you now.
You got it.
All right. So yeah, we represent the manufacturers of roof trusses, floor trusses, wall panels, and a few other things that are kind of scattered in there. But really our aim is to provide best practices, some safety documents, and information to make sure that trusses are installed properly, as well as wall panels, as well as educational programs to our members, and then up and down the supply chain as well to be able to utilize components like we see. Most of what we talk about is going to be with wood trusses and wall panels, but we do represent steel manufacturers as well for cold form steel. So kind of looking through this here, what are structural building components? And this is going to be a fairly high level. Some of you may already know this. Hopefully we get some nuggets. We'll have some questions at the end if you want to get into any specifics, but really, our bread and butter are going to be roof trusses. They've been around for probably 50, 60 years now. In some capacity, they've gotten a lot more complex as the computing power has allowed for more complex roof designs. But probably for this instance and for this audience, common trusses like we see here, comprised of a lot of different things. And really the foremost thing to know is the triangulation. Really what we're doing is we're taking, what would be rafters and ceiling joists, and we're 2x10s, 2x8s, 2x6s, and moving that into like 2x4 material. Some things to kind of pay attention to. There's the slope or the pitch of the truss. That's one that can get people kind of tripped up. Typically it's a 412, 512, 812, 1212. That's typically how we talk about it. Some will say 5/12 and that, typically not 12/5. It's usually 512 is a normal nomenclature there. Also, another thing that I like to talk about is the heel height. That is that space over the wall at the exterior bearing, and can be very confusing to get that correct. If there's going to be a problem, it's probably going to be there in communication. And one thing that does happen in a lot of areas where they're a lot more concerned about energy efficiency is an energy heel. So if you increase the height there over the wall, you're allowed to get more insulation over the wall, and it is one of those, entry points for hot to meet cold or cold to meet hot, to where you can lose a lot of your efficiency from your heating or your cooling out at that place. So increasing that height really helps with energy efficiency when it goes to trusses. Also, the overhang, that is one that, a lot of people will trim the overhangs back. As long as you stay outside of the plate and the interior truss, you should be fine there. But overhangs, typically 2 foot, but, depending on where the, where the project is, it can vary from 0 up to 3 feet in some areas. Kind of a cool story. My grandfather built houses, and what he would do in our area in Montana was a 512 with a 3 foot overhang on a hip roof. And you get kind of some of that passive solar in the winter, but then also once the sun is a little higher, it shades it in the summertime too. So there's some tricks that you can play there, knowing your area and kind of where you're at. So that's roof trusses kind of in general. Benefits, the spans, and that is one thing that is not always front of mind, but think about load path. And when any of the loads that affect the roof, from wind, snow, even the dead loads from the shingles or materials, somehow that weight has got to get to the foundation. Roof trusses are very efficient at doing that. If you look at stick frame as an alternative, a lot of times you have interior bearings, and that isn't always resolved. I just had this conversation this morning with some people about, they were bringing point loads into the interior of the house, and they were causing some problems in the floor system. So always be front of mind with that. The other thing is the time savings. It is really, that's one of the benefits is you can have loaded trusses show up. You can put the roof up in a relatively easy, quick time compared to what it would be for a stick frame structure. Also, interior bearing locations, you really don't have many. There might be instances, but by and large, if you wanted to remodel and move the walls around, you can do that a lot of times with the trussed roof system. Also, the reduction in the labor cost and the skill, compared to hand cutting or field framing a project. There's a lot of skill that's there that isn't always available in all areas. Kind of moving into some floor trusses. This is one that is a little bit more, sophisticated when it comes to some structure designs. It really, when you look at total cost, they are competitive, but sometimes when you look at the lineal foot compared to, just a 2x10 joist or a I joist, it might not appear that way, but if you design it properly, you can do a lot of good things with floor trusses. Couple of the tips there, they can also be used as headers and walls. You can, talk with your component manufacturer, and you can design those to where you can allow for some energy efficiency, get some insulation there in that header, as opposed to a solid header, but then also reducing the weight on the wall panels as well. But one thing that I always like to remind folks is the strong back, and that's kind of that green 2x material there. That helps tie the trusses together and really helps stiffen up that floor system. So that's a pretty good practice there. We try to remind people, I've even been on projects where we forgot to do that and we had to come back and do it. So always kind of, it's one of those tips to try to remember where to do that. And in our building component safety information guide, which is available on our website, we provide a few different options there for how you can install the strong backs, as well as a whole bunch of other bracing information for all types of trusses. Benefits there, again, larger, clear spans. There's a lot that you can do with floor trusses. It's a engineered, designed product. It's not a kind of a codified type thing that you just put in, based on what's in the spec book. So you can talk with the designer on the project if you've got specific things that you'd like to do with the floor system. There's a lot of creative uses and applications for floor trusses, but also the spacing for, maximum efficiency, also with speed. And that's one of the things that we are seeing a lot of instances is a floor cassette, to where they are taking the floor trusses, and this can be done with iJoists or really any floor system, but making a cassette offsite and then just installing it when the time comes to do that on site. That's one of the things that we see is the most beneficial use of the time savings using components. And another thing that is one of my favorites, is the MEP, the mechanicals, specifically the HVAC systems, can be designed to where they can be put into the floor truss system. And if you've ever been in a basement of a structure and you've kind of seen that trunk line that's been framed down, sometimes you hit your head on it if you're a tall person. That it helps eliminate that and the need for that. So that's a really good use of floor trusses. And then the other thing, the stiffness, it can be designed into the system. And that is something that probably isn't well known, that if you want it to be a specific part of the house wants to be very stiff, maybe you've got a pool table that's going to happen there, or a kitchen island, that kind of stuff with some granite countertops, that can be designed into the floor system. And that is one of the things that often goes overlooked. And then, more apartment complexes, we get some cantilever with some balcony details that happen there with floor trusses. So wall panels, that's probably one of the things that, I wish when whoever introduced the concept of wall panels, when it was coming to a framing component, they didn't do much to try to add value there. It's really, let's replicate exactly what happens in the field. So, that's kind of one of those one-for-one type things. There are some benefits that you can have with wall panels. I'm seeing some products come down the pipe that, in a few years, we're going to see where some wall panels will have some benefits with meeting energy code requirements. We're not quite there yet, but that is one of the things with wall panels that, I think we're going to see a controlled environment where you can control your nailing. It's a little more ergonomic for the people manufacturing. Those things are going to start making wall panels to where they're a little bit more efficient. In larger apartment complexes where you want to stack maybe some advanced framing, the software that you use to create wall panels allows for that to happen a lot easier as well. So that's one of those that, I think we're going to start making some strides with the factory built wall panels. And then a lot of the companies have been offering a pre-cut wall package, which essentially panelizes the structure and does all the cutting, labels it, marks it, and gives you diagrams to install in the field. But you're not actually building it in the manufactured setting. You're doing that in the job site. So you're not shipping as much air to the job site once you get there. So with that, the benefits, you can reduce the complexity of the framing projects, minimizing the variables. There's a lot of consistency from the nailing to also the shear nailing. If you, are in a jurisdiction that is really cognizant or really aware of, shiners, or, if it's nailed too much, you can really control that in the manufactured setting. But also, sheathing and building wrap, that can be applied by the component manufacturer. I've even seen some that will include portions of insulation with some spray and foam applied in the manufactured setting. So that helps as well. And it also is very fast and efficient for installation. So beyond that, we did a study that gave us some information called Framing the American Dream. We did it 20 years apart. And surprisingly enough, we got very similar information, which suggests it reiterated the importance of the first one in 1995 in Houston, but in 2015, when we did it in Wisconsin, we saw some pretty good results there. We've got a quick video here to kind of show the side by side between the two. So the one on the right, you can really see, just how quick it's going up compared to, the stick frame. But it utilized the floor cassettes, it utilized roof trusses. They didn't frame the roof on the ground. Sometimes you'll see people that'll do that. But really, it was a pretty quick installation. And obviously, we produced this, so, we got the results we wanted or anticipated and expected. So I'll kind of skip through this. You can kind of get the point of, where we're at with the stick frame house on the left there. So what did we find from that? We've got some documentation on, the best way to frame a house. We do have bestwaytoframe.com. If you want some more information, you can go there. But specifically, it's the savings and, just the time. With that study, we figured out you could build 2.5 houses in the time it would take you to stick frame one. So time equals money in a lot of cases with a lot of production builders who we, work with to adopt components, but also just time for on the job site, less, things go wrong as you kind of go in there. Also materials. There was a lot of board footage. And while lumber prices have kind of come back to a reasonable level now, in the last couple of years, this was a really big deal, trying to take board footage out of the house. And also dumpster savings, you know, a lot less waste when you use a component, because they're doing that in a manufactured setting. You know, when I was doing it, we had a computer program called a board stretcher that would nest the pieces together to minimize the waste. And in our operation, we often had between 3 and 4% of waste, which we would try to then reuse in other areas. So it naturally is a much greener process and product as a result too. So component manufacturers, we are in all 50 states. We serve, you know, the complete, you know, entirety of the United States, which is really cool. We're very fragmented, you know, so there's a lot of relationships that you can develop locally. You can scan that QR code if you're quick on the draw. And if not, you can go to our website, structural building component or SBCA-components.com, and find it there where there's somebody in your market that should be offering trusses. And I would encourage you to establish a relationship, articulate what it is that you're working on, your needs, and they'll try to, you know, model what they can to fit your needs there. So with that, again, my name is Jess. Feel free to reach out to us at SBCA Components. And then also Ashley really deserves the credit. She was ill today, but she put all this together. She's a great resource on our team too. So she did a good job with this and the relationship with this organization. So with that, we will turn it over to Matt.
Okay. Okay, there we go. To bring everybody up to speed.
Mac, remember to take control so you can advance the slides.
Okay. Let's see here.
Got it.
Okay, there we go. All right, to bring everybody up to speed, some of you recall last fall we had a hack training here in Richmond, Virginia. And so I'm coming from Richmond, Virginia. During that training, we went out to visit a plant that was panelizing, prefabbing the wall panels, very similar to what Jess was talking about. And so at that day, I made a comment that our program here at Habitat of Caroline, we use something very similar in the wall panelization, but as is mobile, we're able to move it from site to site. And so Earl has asked me to expand some thoughts about how we do that. So today's presentation is all about prefabbing the walls and how we go about that, set it up, how we train for it, and the benefits of it. So let's take a look here. So let's see if we can get these slides moving.
You may have to hit the arrow key on the screen the first time.
There we go. Okay, so in determining if this is the correct process for you, there's some things you want to consider. For one thing, are you currently in a self-help program or considering a self-help? Now, our self-help program, our homeowners have to build, they have to touch 65% of everything they do on the project. So currently, our homeowners are framing their own homes. We made reference to stick framing the home, so they are and doing that process. So are you currently framing your walls, or are you purchasing the walls already prefabricated? Now you heard Jess speak about that. They have groups throughout the United States that will prefab those wall panels for you. I really like the idea of the concept of pre-cut. And I know in that area, we have several manufacturers that offer a pre-cut package. And that's really interesting. We haven't used that process, but that is certainly something you will want to consider. The other thing you need to understand about your program, do you have someone that that has the skills and abilities to coordinate the process? As we go through some of the things to consider, you need to pay a close attention to whether or not you think you have somebody that can put the whole process together. So now the reasons for considering this method, we've determined here in our program, by having a mobile setup, it gives an alternative way for the homeowner to meet their required hours. So out on the job site, with all the trip hazards and everything that goes along with that, so oftentimes it's very difficult to find the hours in the evening to panelize the walls. So with our mobile setup, what we do is we have a tent, as an event tent, that's 20 foot by 40 foot. And we panelize the walls under that tent and control that environment. So in doing so, we can give longer hours in the evening for the homeowners to get in their required hours. It also gives you more opportunity for the community to get involved. We moved this portable production site from places like churches, parking lots, anything that has a hard surface. We have worked out process in an old abandoned warehouse where we have a concrete floor, and then we just set up in that. And by being able to move around, we can take this production site any place we want to get the job done. It gives the community, it gives you an opportunity to voice what you're doing for affordable homes. A lot of people in the community, as is a new program, so we're still getting the word out that people can afford homes in that area. So by going to different parts of the county, to different churches in the area, we're able to communicate better about affordable homes and the opportunities that people will have to get in affordable homes. So in considering this, if these are some of the reasons that you need to consider whether this program is going to fit in your process. So if you've determined at this point that it's something that will bring value to your program, then the next part is to prepare for it. Now, let's see if I can get to, okay, what I do to prepare for a group to come out and prefab these walls. This is a rough idea of what I do personally. It was told to you that I have right now about 50 years building experience and doing this. So I do this on every house. It's part of my process to evaluate the house and what goes into it. And it helps me control cost when I analyze a set of plans like this. So this is an everyday process for me. It also lets me to, gives me time to evaluate the blueprints totally. Every wall in there, make adjustments to anything that I think would improve the quality of the home. So the first thing I do is to analyze the blueprints, and you see in this picture, I label every wall. And if you notice that the outside walls, I give it a number, whereas the inside walls, I usually give it an part of the alphabet, you see. And so, again, I give each wall an identification, and and determine the layout. The next thing I do would be to make a cut sheet. And do we have a picture of the cut sheet? Well, we don't. In making a cut sheet, after I identify the walls, I take all the measurements and list it. So each wall has its own measurement. And then across that cut sheet, everything that goes in that wall is identified on that cut sheet. The length of the wall, if it's a window or a door, what size it is, how many 2x4s are in there, the jack posts that are in that particular wall, wall ties, corners. So everything is identified and listed on that cut sheet. And this helps me keep an order so that when we go to build the walls, everyone that's involved will understand exactly what goes into that cut sheet. It also helps me keep control of the cost of the project and knowing exactly how many 2x4s. If you have enough experience, you'll know exactly how many nails to buy for the project by determining how many 2x4s and what kind of headers and the nailing pattern. You're able to actually know exactly what's in there. And so it's a way for me to be prepared for a large group, especially groups that don't have the experience to know how to put a wall together. So this cut sheet is a real valuable tool for me. I can get out on the job site and give each one of the leaders out on the site that cut sheet. And so everybody should know exactly what is intended to do that day. You know, in preparing for the site itself, you have to go through the logistics of that site. And on your screen, it's not showing up real clear on my screen here, but you see a typical layout of what I do to prepare for the site itself, for that tent, where we're going to set it up. And so I draw out that workspace area, I identify a safety area, and you can see the orange in the screen there. You also see the location of the trailer, how we set that up in relationship to the tent, the production area. By doing this, it has a lot to do with safety protocol. We're trying to keep out people or warn people about, you know, this is a work site. The policy is, you can see where we created that fenced in area around the trailer and the entrance to the tent. So it defines an area that's a hard hat area. So everyone within that area would have to wear a hard hat and safety glasses and follow OSHA protocols. So it helps me in this setup to identify and develop a safety plan. And I take this and, you know, with the volunteers, obviously we do things like provide an area for first aid. This is also where we welcome people. Also in this area is where we feed them lunch on a Saturday. So it's very important to me to draw out a site plan, have a clear picture of what's going on when we get out to the job site to set things up. Everyone knows what the intent is, and usually setting up that site is an easy process because now everyone knows exactly what's going on and the purpose behind it. On step 4, we developed the work area. So here's a design where you can see it's 20 foot by 40 foot. This is the tent. And starting on the left there, after we build the walls in that blue area, that represents the pallet. So we create a pallet that's 8 foot by 16 foot. This is where we stack the walls. You'll see in another picture here shortly what we do after how we transport the walls to the job site. So this blue area, shaded area, is where all the walls are stacked on a pallet once they are put together. The next box there is a production floor, or what we call the dance floor. This is what allows us to be mobile. It's a very simple process. On any hard surface, we just lay 2x4s down flat. We don't nail that frame together. We just lay 7/16 OSB board over top of those 2x4s. Normally, we have them 16 inches on center. So we create this platform. Normally, the platform in this case, you see is 20 foot wide. It's the width of the event tent. And we make this platform at least 8'7" wide. And the reason we do this is where we can lay the wall down. We chalk a line just the same as you would to do on a subfloor. And we align the walls to the chalk line, and we're able to square the wall up and then put the sheathing on it. And it's the same process that's used out on the job site. But this is the key to everything that we do, because it allows for a safe place, a flat place to assemble the walls. And you see, we put that dance floor adjacent to the pallet. So once the wall is built, it's very close to the pallet, and we can get the job done quickly. Now, if you look to the right of the dance floor, you see I've given you a scenario of how we stack the materials. So as the supplier comes out, this is what we do in order to have the production we want. Then we don't scatter the material around. We just stack it up. You can see we put a whole pile of a hack of 2x4s. Then you see a hack of OSB board, and then the second hack of 2x4s. And so you see how tightly they are put together. Now, if you notice to the right of it, we have tables, just simply built tables, production tables. They're generally 2 foot wide by 8 foot long. And in the pictures coming up, we'll show you how we use these tables. But you see how close they are to the material. So the idea is, just like in the factory that we visited in Richmond, they set up a process where people are able to put things together quickly. And, you know, all the benefits that Jess was talking about, and panelization, about waste material and the dumpster thought process, all those benefits are the same here in this little production center. It just, this 20 by 40 tent is not that 10,000 square foot factory that y'all had visited. So we try to do the same thing within this space as they do in the factory. And it's the same process of putting the walls together. So I have some slides here. That's the cut sheet. And you'll see there how it's laid out. You see wall 1 and the length of it. And that doesn't have a lot going on. in wall 1, but if you look down at wall 3, you can follow through and see exactly all the information that it needs for wall 3. So that's a good picture of a cut sheet. Now in this other process, I take my homeowners through training. Here you see in the foreground there, this is actually a homeowner going through training. The gentleman in the back there is a volunteer that's been with us for the last 3 years. So he's well aware of all the processes we do. But we're trying to teach Jimmy here the process of once we actually go on site to build the walls, then he's familiar with every aspect of the framing. And what I try to do is take 2 people like this and train them, and then we bring in 2 or 3 other people. So now these 2 people can help me train the other 3 that's coming aboard. This picture shows you that we take a regular DeWalt chop saw, and when we go to cut the jack post, we just make a mark on the tray of the saw for the length that we want to cut. So we're not measuring every jack post. So on the cut sheet, if we see a jack post is 80.5 inches, then prior to Jimmy coming up to the saw, we'll put a pre-cut stud in, measure it, find out where the blade is going to cut that mark, and then we mark the end of the stud and indicate it right on the chop saw, the length of the jack post. So in a process like this, you always have the correct results. Anybody without any experience can put that 2x4 in there, make a cut, and come out with a square cut and the proper length every time. And so here you see Jimmy has taken the piece that's been cut off. We refer this to a drop, and he's storing it under the cut table. It no longer becomes a trip hazard, so it's safe. Also, we'll use these drop pieces later on to create corners and wall ties. So again, this is a training that I put all my homeowners through. Then when large volunteer groups come out, my homeowners know exactly what's expected of them. So we have a saying around here that proper preparation prevents poor production. And so you see Jimmy's cutting and placing the drop, and we have Don now moving that piece of 2x4 to the next table, and that's the assembly table. And here you see an example of the assembly table. Now, we're real fortunate, in fact, that Don and I came up with a jig that we created where we put a stud into the jig, and then the pre-cut jack you see laying on the table itself, and we place that in the jig. Now this jig helps us to align the 2x4 and the jack post perfectly. We have a difficult time sometimes to get our volunteers to line up the 2x4s properly. So you see we can have better quality by a simple jig like this. And then you see Jimmy is able to just nail the stud. Okay, right here is step 9, where we've taken the drop and we've created a simple jig to help stabilize the 2x4 as we nail it. And so Jimmy is prepared to build a wall tie here. And you see with a simple jig, it controls the process and keeps everything even again. So Jimmy's doing a good job for us. Now, in this picture, step 11, you actually see the dance floor. And if you look real closely there, where the hose goes across there, that orange looking area is the production floor itself, the dance floor. You see where we have the wall unit, where we've laid it out, built it, squared the wall up. And so this process right here, the homeowner there with the American flag, he's finished nailing off the sheathing, and it's ready to be stacked. This particular site was a warehouse we had. That warehouse was like a 30 by 30 warehouse, but it's the same process where we build the dance floor, gives an area to assemble the walls, and then we stack the walls. And here is a picture of stacking the walls. Okay, after the walls are stacked, here's a picture of where we get a local tow truck company, and they winch the walls up on the truck, and it's ready for delivery. And of course, we take the walls out and assemble it on the job site. So that's a simple process. It's a little different. It has a lot of value to it in our program, again, because it extends some work hours in the evening. It creates a safe place to do that. And that's how simple it really is. So I hope it works out for your program. It certainly seems to be working well for our program.
Nicole, are you around to field questions?
I didn't know if Earl was gonna, that's fine. Yep, looks like we have a couple questions that came in for Jess. Earl writes, with the savings on labor, time, materials, and dump fees, what type of savings can builders realize using wall panels?
Yeah, that's a good question that I'm going to do my best to try to dodge on.
Sure.
Just because it depends on a few things. You know, I would say around that 10%, just because a good anecdotal, but it depends on who's installing the wall panels. If you're asking a framer that's always done it, where they've done it on site, to change their ways, you're asking them to kind of take a haircut. They're doing, you know, a different process. So they don't want to lower their price, you know, with the first job or initially. Where I see the most success with wall panels is framers, people that are used to build them in the field, that then decide they want to do it in a manufactured location, and they kind of backward integrate to where they start building them in their own wall panel facility. And that's where you see the greatest savings, because they know all the tricks and they know what they're trying to achieve better in that facility. But you know, the total. I'm anxious for a gentleman named Scott Saddam, who, if you read Professional Builder, he does an article, I think, every month. He's coming out with a calculator that will allow you to look at each job by job. I just heard him speak yesterday. He should be coming out with that here in the next few months. That would be the best, because then you can do it as close of an apples to apples comparison as possible.
And can you say that publication again? What was the name of it again?
Professional Builder.
Okay. All right. Great. And it looks like we have another question for Jess. What would one of our groups do to obtain quotes for wall panels?
Yeah, once you've got your construction documents, your blueprints ready, reach out to a component manufacturer, a truss manufacturer that does walls, and you can find them on our website. You can Google them. Some, not all, will build walls. If they don't, you can probably just ask them, who are the best ones in the area, and then contact that person. A lot of times your lumberyard has a component manufacturing operation as well, that they will do trusses and wall panels. So really just asking around from your existing contacts would probably be the easiest, but a website, Google, that sort of stuff will allow you to see who does it as well. Most will list it on their website if they do that. And then once you make contact, give them your drawings, and then they will work up the quote and talk it over. And kind of some of the things Mac was getting to there, sequencing, making sure you know which wall panel you want to start with, to make sure that they don't build them where that's on the bottom of the pile. And it sounds easy from this vantage, but until you want to start with that one that's on the bottom and you have to spend half a day moving them all, you learn that lesson quick. So.
Great.
Jess, I had another question. You mentioned floor panels, wall panels, trusses, and some other things. What are some other things?
Yeah, we're seeing more pre-cut or pre-built stairways, which should probably be applicable to this group, because stairs are one of the hardest things to do. There's a lot of skill and talent required to do that properly. Kind of the headers, the framing portions, which Mac was getting to too, doing the corners, or I call them keyways, or the intersections for the other walls, even just the pre-framed window openings, door openings. So there's a lot of different, you can take it as far or as little as you want with these things. So that would be some of the other things as well there.
You mentioned some emerging technology which would increase energy efficiency and things like that. Can you tell us, since you sit in the driver's seat at top of this whole monster, what do you see happening in this industry, and where's it going in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I think that we're going to get a lot more. The stud is going to change. Instead of just being a complete, uniform piece of wood, I think you're going to see some things there. One that's already on the market is T-stud, which is an expensive. It provides it's meeting the need, and it's not going to be as cost comparison as the others, but I think there's going to be some competition in that realm, to where you break that thermal bridging that just a piece of lumber has, as it goes from cold to hot. And that's one that I'm excited about. I think the way that the materials go together, and just the complete utilization of all between the floor, wall, and roof all together is going to be a really good, usage in kind of breaking down some of those silos that exist now.
Okay. I guess we should find out if there's any other questions from the group.
This is Stephanie. I'm kind of curious to hear what people in the field are doing, if they're using wall panels or roof trusses. So we had a poll. Do you want to maybe ask the poll and see what
Sure, go ahead.
other people are doing?
Do you have it to put up, or?
I think Dan has it. Oh, thank you, Dan.
And Claudia Shea did write that we've always used pre-assembled roof trusses as they're pre-engineered, which is essential in Hawaii, where we have class 5 hurricanes.
Yeah, and that's a great point, that there's a lot of wind loading, and the trusses are specific to the lot when it comes to loading. In my neck of the woods with snow loading, or in high wind areas, or even seismic, if you get into California and some of those things, they're 100% adaptable to whatever the code environment is, or the requirement for that specific area. which is nice.
Do you have that poll question? Is that,
So it's up in the chat, and the results were 66% of our attendees today are using roof trusses. 5% are using structural wall panels. 5% are using floor systems, and 21% aren't using anything.
okay.
That's crazy accurate for what market adoption across the United States is for the percentages.
Wow,
Really?
interesting.
We can, if anybody wants to ask any verbal questions, please raise your hand.
I guess I have a question for Mac on his dance floor. Do you ever have the opportunity to raise that up to where people are working kind of at waist height, as opposed to, if I saw it right, on the close to the ground?
Sure. You know, the talking points here, I have to keep simple, but with a little bit of imagination, you know, we've used like a 8 foot by 18 deck over trailer is ideal for, and you've been in factories where they make these wall panels, and you know everything is lifted up high enough to be comfortable working. So it's a give and take. We find out this little dance floor is an easy way to quickly establish an area to frame the walls. So for this purpose, it was an easy conversation. But I hope that people understand that with a little imagination, that they can do this in some form anywhere. It doesn't even have to be mobile. It can be done on site with the dance floor. But with the tent, we're able to put up lighting up in the tent and control the. Virginia has the worst case scenario of building a house because of the streams of heat and cold and the weather that we have. I also would like to make a comment that we're putting together a program where we're actually using prefab foundations. In our area, the building science is telling us that the best way to control the energy in the home is to have conditioned crawl space. So we have a company that produces these prefab foundations. So we're going to put a prefab foundation. We're going to shove that in the ground to make a zero entry product. I would really encourage, if people, the very best method for this is to have a company to panelize those walls for them. So in our self-help program, they still can get their credit for framing the houses by setting the walls. So all the necessary preparation and everything to create these walls obviously is done for them by a company. So I would really encourage the self-help group out there to look into prefabricated walls. And that's what I have to offer.
Mac, if one of our groups wanted to come to Virginia and watch your production or see how you do it or learn from you, would you be amenable to that?
Absolutely. And we've applied for a grant with a local group to make videos. We're working closely with the high school now, and we have a partnership with our local high school. And they're going to build a house for us, the entire thing. They're going to build a modular home on campus, and we're developing a subdivision. So they're going to set that modular on one of our lots, and they're going to sell it to a veteran. So moving forward, as we build our next group of homes, 4 homes, we're hoping that we can have each step videoed for training purposes. So the school will be able just to pop in a short 3 to 5 minute video on every aspect I have to build a house. So hopefully in the future we'll have some training videos. Of course, they're available to anyone out there. So
That's great.
but yeah,
Thank you.
if they want to come out and participate, we enjoy having them.
Thank you. I was with Mac at that training session in Virginia, and he was like a kid on Christmas morning when he got into that plant and watched them do all of that work. And I could see the bells and wheels spinning in his head. And then he came back to our class and we couldn't stop him talking about it. So I figured that he'd be a great one to present today and share some of that knowledge. I guess one last question I have is we've talked independently about how this integrates better with the community rather than isolating the community. Could you just touch on that for a second?
Yeah, it's it's all about investment. If you can get the public to look into your program and found value in the program, and some of them will come out to a job site, but seriously, if you move it into a public area, you could do this at a Food Line parking lot. If you use your creativity, you can take this as far as you want. On May 6th, we don't do this at the high school. They're bringing in 5 additional high schools, and they're gonna have a competition. And they needed a project, and I have a project for them. They can build walls, But the Fredericksburg Builders Association, the largest one around in our area, they're backing it, and they're bringing in the lieutenant governor. We're going to be featured on the local news that evening. And you see, all because we're doing this at a high school, and being mobile like this, it just dumbs everything down. And the whole idea is the preparation for the cut sheet. So I can give the 5 high school, classes just a cut sheet. We actually have the building official that's going to come out and participate because he just wants to do that. He's excited about it. So you can see by doing that, it makes the program, it's just, you get free advertisement literally across the state of Virginia on what we're doing. So it's just making people aware, number one, that affordable homes can be done. We can, it's such a critical shortage, but it gives people hope that they can have an affordable home. And it shows how simple it really is, that they can build their own home. So the value of the mobile thing is you just can't put a price tag on it. It just works so well in being able to communicate with the community. And they're more willing to give to Habitat. They're more willing to come out and be a part of the community to help build the houses. So just like an incredible way to get the word out and build excitement into the program.
Thank you. That's a benefit that you don't often see coming from the construction side of it that promotes your program, and everybody on this call, all of us work to get our program out in front of everyone. Are there any other questions? If there isn't, I'd just like to wrap up by saying that we discussed a lot today, using pre-manufactured building components in our construction projects, along with their benefits, cost savings, faster construction, and improved quality control and sustainability benefits. And like Jess said, if you want to consider these for your project, I guess I'd start with where you order trusses. I think everybody uses roof trusses, or if you're not, you should. But you talk to your truss supplier. I would start there. If they don't carry them, they could perhaps recommend you to someone else. But then you may end up getting your roof trusses there as well. You could go to the Structural Building Component Association website and get a listing there. So I'd like to thank both Jess and Mac for the time they put into putting this together and presenting for us today. Ashley, I'd also like to thank Ashley, who was supposed to be with us today, but is under the weather. And thank you all for joining.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.